Hi, Dave here. This archaeonomy video is all about the pieces of ordnance that were used in the New Zealand Wars. The artillery pieces used to bombard and defend Maurie Pa, and therefore pound shot, shell and shrapnel into archaeological sites around the country. The New Zealand Wars occurred at a time of rapid technological change, and were used to test some new artillery pieces. The weapons used in the early campaigns would not be out of place on the Napoleonic Wars battlefield, while those used in the Waikato and Bay of Plenty on were cutting-edge technology at the time. So let's start with the most basic weapons. Smooth-bore, muzzle-loading ship's guns, colloquially called cannons. They vary in size and therefore power from tiny 6-pounders to the fearsome 8-inch equating to 68-pound guns. The pound measurement refers to the weight of the projectile that the gun fires, while the inch measurement is the caliber or diameter of the inside of the barrel. Depending on the particular weapon, it could be named using either measurement. A carronade was a shorter gun, first made by the Carron Iron Works in Scotland. It was designed to deliver a heavy round at relatively low speed at close range, made specifically for the brutal close combat gunnery performed by wooden naval vessels. To illustrate the development and armaments over a short period of time, I'll compare two naval vessels, both of the same class. They're both corvettes. HMS North Star in 1845 was armed with 20 32-pound carronades, 6 18-pound carronades, and 2 long 9-pound chasers, while HMS Esk in 1864 had 18 8-inch guns and a 10-inch, which is 84-pound, chaser. Maurie would salvage and use ship's guns, typically small to medium carronades from shipwrecks, while the British would either be firing these from naval warships or dismounting them and lugging them inland with naval gun crews. As the name would suggest, these guns were smooth-bore, so no rifling, and muzzle loading, and they were used to provide direct fire, the shot travelling at a low angle, hitting the target directly. As they were either being fired from or dismounted from a ship, they would have ship's carriages, with tiny wheels designed for rolling around on wooden decks, not the large spoked wheels of a proper field carriage. This generally meant that they'd have to be loaded into drays for any kind of transport inland. Before I carry on with other types of artillery, I'll go through the different types of ammunition that they used. Solid shot is your classic cast iron cannonball, well suited for smashing down the wooden palisades of Pa, creating showers of deadly splinters. On European battlefields, they could be bounced across the surface of the ground like you'd skip a stone on water, and could devastate columns of troops or a warship if fired down the length of the formation or the vessel, in which case it was called crossing the T. In New Zealand, though, they're primarily used to smash down the palisades of Pa, as they have relatively little effect on earthworks. In this context, shells are hollow cast iron balls, with an explosive charge inside, equipped with a time fuse, allowing them to be set to explode at a predetermined moment after firing. More useful with indirect than direct fire, though, where solid shot was king. They came in two main varieties, common and shrapnel. A common shell is simply a hollow cast iron ball filled with black powder and equipped with a time fuse. Shrapnel shells were the invention of Major General Henry Shrapnel of the Royal Artillery. They have an explosive charge at the core of the shell, surrounded by musket balls, which add to the destructive explosion of the shell. Because the power of the detonating shell would flatten or deform a normal soft lead musket ball, and thus be less efficient, the balls used in shrapnel shells had their lead hardened with antimony, allowing archaeologists to determine whether a particular ball came from a musket or from a shell. Carcass is a type of hollow shell like a common shell, but rather than containing explosive, it contains an incendiary mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, resin, sulfide of antimony, turpentine, and tallow. The outer shell normally has 3 vent holes to burn out of while it's in motion, and the shell is designed to crack open on impact and spill out its flaming contents. While this potentially sounds really effective, it saw very little use here and never saw much success. Grape shot is a cluster of smaller cannonballs, allowing a single shot of a large gun to behave like a volley of smaller ones. It's not as useful as case shot against infantry due to the reduced number of projectiles, but has a longer effective range, Therein lies the trade-off. This ball here is from a 12-pound grape shot and would have had 8 friends in its complete arrangement. Finally, we have case or canister shot. Literally a tin of small balls loaded into the muzzle that turns the gun into a giant shotgun. Devastating at close range. For those familiar with shotguns, you can visualize solid shot as a scaled-up slug, grape as buckshot, and canister as birdshot. I don't think too many shotgun owners fire explosive slugs, so I don't have an analogue for shells. There are other exotic, specialised kinds of shot, such as chain, bar and hot shot, but I know of no evidence of them ever being used here in New Zealand. Maori suffered from a lack of proper ammunition for their carronades, and were often forced to use whatever scrap metal they could get hold of, which has nowhere near the ballistic performance of a purpose-made projectile. Old ships' guns were in place to defend important positions. For example, Ruapekapeka Pa in Northland, and Mary Mary Pa and Patarangi Pa in the Waikato. Alright, moving on from the direct fire of cannons, we come to mortars. Short, muzzle-loading ordnance that launched explosive shells at a high trajectory down onto a target. The most commonly used was the 4.4-inch Cohen mortar, although mortars as large as 8-inch saw service and smaller examples existed. Mortars were the master of indirect fire. The principle being to time the fuse so that the shell explodes as an air burst over the enemy's trenches, raining shrapnel down on the occupants of said trenches. While effective on rifle pits and open trenches, gunfighter power with bunkers would be immune to such fire. It would be possible to set the shell to land and explode underground, but first you would have to have the shell hit the bunker and then be able to penetrate the roof of the bunker for that to be effective. At this time period, howitzers were a compromise between the two weapons. They're longer-barreled, smooth-bore, muzzle-loading artillery pieces, capable of both direct and indirect fire, although not quite as high an angle as a mortar. 12 and 24-pound howitzers saw service in New Zealand, and they had a good reputation for reliability. They were simple. Mobility, they had field carriages, and flexibility, they could do both indirect and direct fire, serving right the way through the wars. They could use the full range of ammunition, but principally were using explosive shells delivering indirect fire. At the time of the New Zealand Wars, Armstrong guns were the latest in military technology. Adopted by the British military in 1858, they were the invention of the brilliant engineer Lord William Armstrong, whose company built the lifting mechanism for Tower Bridge and was the first person in Britain to power his home with hydroelectricity. Armstrong guns were rifled, breech-loading artillery pieces, available in a wide range of sizes. The smaller 6-pounders were used by horse artillery, rapidly deployed where and when needed. The 12-pounders were your standard field artillery, also used to arm the Waikato gunboats. 40-pound siege guns were employed at Mary Mary and Gate Pa, and a massive 110-pound Armstrong was used at Gate Pa. Armstrongs could fire solid projectiles, explosive shells using either a time or an impact fuse, or case shot. They had a great reputation for accuracy due to their rifled barrels, allowing the gunners to put the shot and shells where they wanted them with greater ease, which made them really popular in New Zealand. However, they also developed a bad reputation for unreliability. Was that reputation deserved? A breech-loading mechanism will inevitably be a more mechanically complicated system than a one-piece muzzle-loading one. This increases the chance of both mechanical and human error. One problem they had, unrelated to either, was the breaking of the trails on the carriages, which was a result of cost-cutting on the Army's part. The 12-pound Armstrong barrels had been mounted onto recycled old 9-pound field carriages, which were unable to withstand the forces generated by the larger gun. There was an issue with the breech screws going rusty in the rain, simply because the gunners were not performing the basic maintenance of cleaning and oiling them. The lead sheaths on the ammunition, made to bite into the rifle in the same way as a copper driving band does on a modern shell, were known to fly off the shells when they were fired, creating a hazard to anyone around the gun, a problem that was remedied as soon as it was identified. There was also an issue with the iron vent pieces, a problem created by the gun crews not tightening the breech enough before firing. That was solved by replacing the wrought iron part with steel and issuing every gun with a spare. There were other general issues with the breach, largely the result of gun crews not used to such a mechanically complicated device, failing to keep it clean and well maintained. Instead of seeing these issues as teething problems and working through them as other world powers did with their early breech-loading artillery, the British government reverted to muzzle-loading ordnance in 1870, only returned to breech loaders in the mid-1880s. The rifled muzzle-loaders that replaced the Armstrongs combined simplicity with accuracy and were seen as an ideal compromise at the time, although with hindsight, which is 2020, they were clearly a retrograde step. The last category of ordnance I will mention are Congreve rockets. While mortar shells were the bombs bursting in air, Congreve rockets were the rockets' red glare. As the US national anthem states, Congreve rockets were invented in 1804. By invented, I mean copied off the Mysorean rockets used by Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan against the British in the 18th century. These giant metal skyrockets were used from both ships and gunboats, and taken inland and fired into par. They could mount both explosive and incendiary warheads. Their main advantage was portability. While getting ships' guns inland could be a Herculean task, Congreve rockets and their launching ramps could be carried by soldiers. That being said, they were both inaccurate and ineffective against gunfighter power, which were built to withstand fire from much heavier munitions than rockets. There were other larger, even more powerful pieces of ordnance placed here in New Zealand, installed in the coastal defence role after the New Zealand Wars had ended. Maybe I'll discuss them in a future video. I hope you found this video interesting. Artillery was an important element in New Zealand wars and one of the main technological advantages the British and colonial forces had over Maori. It's a testament to Maori military engineering that they were able to so effectively neutralise this advantage. Even the most powerful pieces of ordnance I've described here had relatively little effect on a well-built Maori gunfighter power. That being said, incomplete gunfighter, or traditional power without any anti-artillery measures, would be devastated by the fire of these weapons. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment and subscribe. Cheers!